Hey gang, Joyce Welsh, Skipping Calves Farms here. I thought I'd shoot a video here on a modification that I've made on my perimeter fence that I just put in. This past month has been a whirlwind. It started out with going to Greg, Judy, and Ian Mitchell Ennis's grazing school in Missouri, and it just tied together stuff I've been looking at and trying to get focused from a number of different perspectives over the last several years. It really did just kind of codify it for me and tie it all together. What I wanted to share with you is I've changed a gate that I just put in a couple, 3 weeks ago. I had each of those individual, and I apologize gang, when I'm here working by myself, I really can't show you what I'm doing while I'm doing it. I just don't have the technology or the ability to shoot while I'm working, because it's just me here. But so as you can kind of imagine, I had each one of those lines hooked up to each one of those handles, and each one of those handles hooked into one of these loops. Now, this loop at the top has been replaced with a bigger loop. And what I'm doing here, let me walk down here and show you. I have a similar type of gate. That was the only gate that I had that I used individual handles with. That was an old design that I had on my old bee yard. And for working out in the bee yard, it worked out okay because I was only going out there once a week or so. And it was something I was comfortable with, and I didn't know any better. And so if any of you do follow Greg Judy's work, he has a poly rope gate. Now, I'm on what I will call a severe shoestring. I didn't have any poly rope. I had poly wire. I'm dealing with a very small scale at this point. So I chose to just go with the poly wire that I already have. I didn't have a need to buy any other supplies from that supplier. Couldn't find it locally. And so I just chose to go with the poly, or excuse me, I'm saying poly wire. Please forgive me. It's poly braid. And so with Greg's design, he uses his fiberglass posts. And I've come to appreciate his fiberglass posts a little bit more since I've worked with him. They do make an inexpensive corner or support post that's relatively easy to work with. I've got to remember to get those painted, by the way. But I only had the few that I got from the grazing school, so I didn't have enough to do with the gates. But I did have a couple of extra 1.5-inch T-posts from Timeless Fence. So what I did, I discovered, if you just turn the post upside down and cut it off where it's got the mark on the bottom, that line on the bottom of the T-post, about 16 inches from the point. Let me go back and show that to you. Rather than watch me walking, let's look at that light. Isn't that pretty? Oh my goodness. Oh, life is good, gang. Life is good. When you're doing what you know you should be doing, what you're doing, when you're doing what is right. I mean, how can you be any more green than to capture sunlight on your fruit and nut trees and your berry bushes and your pasture, and turning that directly into meat, fruit, and vegetables straight from the sun at 90+% efficiency? It doesn't get any greener than that, especially when you do it without any hydrocarbon inputs or virtually zero. Anyway, I digress. Here we go. So here is a timeless 1.5 inch fence post, just as it comes from the factory. And whoops, where did I go? Here we go. I apologize for the video, gang. And if you've seen any of the work on there, the bottom tip of the post is pre-sharpened, and then on the back it's all stamped and labeled, and then you just tap it in until that line gets to ground surface, and you don't have no muss, no fuss, no bother. You don't have to measure. You're done. Well, in using these T-posts as a gate, all I had to do, and I'm going to reach down and grab the tip of the one I cut off and show you what I mean. All you have to do, no muss, no fuss, no bother. You don't even have to measure it. Line it up so it lines up there. Almost lined up. Here we go. You just cut it off at the line. You don't have to worry about pre-measuring anything. It all fits and it all works. And then here we go, back around the other way. And so then all you have to do, gang, is turn that upside. Let me say this right. You turn that upside down. So now the spacing on the bottom is exactly like the spacing on your fencing. All the holes line up. Let me zoom that out. I didn't even realize I was zoomed in. I apologize. All of the holes line up exactly. So there's my 42, there's my 30, there's my 18, there's my 12, and there's my 6. And so I had originally drilled this post with each of those loops for each of these lines. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out those intermediate loops. Now this loop on the bottom is where that bottom line goes in, and you can see I just got my toe there, and you can also see, let me come down and zoom in here a little bit, I have a little groove on the bottom of that that's angled down, and that slides in. Did you see that, gang? That loop slid right in there. And then one of the things I like and one of the things I don't like, but I think it's a smart idea, and that is that these gates are always hot. I think that's a good thing. From a safety standpoint, if it's always hot, and you're never going to make a wrong choice, number one, and you're never going to forget to turn it back on, especially if you're doing leased property or larger properties and it's not something right where you can see. Now I'm going to have a little bit of a challenge here with my two hands, so I may have to kind of tell you, but as you can see on the top, I've got a little bit bigger loop, and I could have evened that out by replacing the bottom loop, but it's just not quite vertical. I don't really care what it looks like. It's just for me, so I just left it. But I use the drill through. I use the looping technique that Joel Salatin talks about, where he puts a loop in the end of the wire. I slid that on through, brought the other loop around, and then looped it and did a hangman's knot on it. And so I kind of like that. And And I like the T-post, and this is why. Because you may not be able to see what I'm doing, and I apologize because I just don't have the hand strength. Let me see if I can put the camera in my pocket without covering the camera too badly. There we go. And so you can see that loop. My hands are about 6 inches away from that hot wire. And I can just slide it over the top, and then it slips down and hooks in. I hope you were able to see that, gang. And so the top loop is in a notch, and the bottom loop is in a notch. And guess what? That pole's not even on the ground. And you can, with that bottom loop, you can have your hand on the top, twist it. See how that came out of that notch when I twisted it? It'll do the same thing on the bottom. Now it's going to argue with me. That loop is a little bit smaller. There we go. And you can just lift the whole thing up and get out of the bottom. Well, that smaller loop is a little bit problematic, but I apologize. It worked for me before from the other side, so having the bigger loop is easier to work with. Having that smaller loop is just what I'm going with. So I apologize it didn't work exactly as I was trying to show you, but I think you get the gist. I'm never going to get an Academy Award for cinematography, I can promise you that. And then you can just click that back up in there. And the thing I like about the notch is twofold. Number one, when you set it up so it's vertical, and I'm going to walk around to the other side so you can see the other gate that I set up on the other side of this truck box. That'll probably give you a better bird's eye view of what I'm trying to talk about. And I appreciate your you're hanging with me, gang. So as you can see here, I did the loop around the bottom and the notch on the bottom. I did the loop around the top and the notch on the top. And what that does is, especially at the top, although I don't like having the twisties there necessarily where my hands are. That's why I put it around the side on the second one when I did it. It means I can slip it in and out, and when I take the top, I've got several inches away from my hands, so I'm not close to the hot wire, and I can keep it super tight because the T-post does flex a little bit more than the fiberglass. It doesn't have to be painted, and with those little notches, it stays in place and can't get knocked around. So that's my gate update for the day. And pan out here, there's my willows and my garden. I don't know, it's starting to grow, and there's my hives that I'm using to pollinate my garden. But check out that evening sky. Is that not just the best office view in the world? Absolutely, absolutely, gang. So with that, I'll sign off for now. I hope you have a blessed day, and whatever you do, just keep chasing the dream.